This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our weekly board chair check-in and update meeting. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I will be moderating this call. In order to avoid background noise, I ask that you please mute yourself while the presenters are speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. If you're calling in from your cell phone, please take a moment to physically mute your cell phone, as I'm unable to mute you from my computer unless I mute all participants. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under services. Thank you.
My name is Bob Rader, and I'm Executive Director of CABE, and I see we have a mighty force today, maybe a little small, but certainly mighty. Yesterday at Summer Leadership, we talked about certain things that are going on in the legal world and in the legislative world, and I wanted to give Patrice some time, in that we sort of ran out of time yesterday, to talk about some of the issues that she thought we should really hit. And I just want to remind everybody that we do have the next episode of our Summer Leadership Conference coming up at noon. So this check-in will only be 45 minutes, and it will be mostly a time for board members to share with each other what's going on. But with that, I want to turn it over to Patrice. And Patrice, you take it, and let's get your the questions answered that you had left over from yesterday, and then go into the board chair share.
Sure, Bob. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to really focus on one issue that I think is going to get an increasing amount of attention in the coming weeks, given the incredible flexibility that districts have in terms of how they're going to be reopening. And that pertains to your collective bargaining agreements. We know that as early as at least a month ago, some of the teachers' unions were making proposals for memorandum of understanding to your existing contracts, even before you had developed your three reopening options. Obviously, the advice at that point was it was premature, and it's still premature until you have settled on a reopening plan, because the decision about the delivery of educational services is clearly a management decision. What you would have to bargain over is the impact of any changes in the working conditions. Most of you have included your teachers in your development of your plans, as well as other staff members, and that's critical. But until you actually decide on a plan, you don't want to enter into formal negotiations with the unions, because that sets in motion some very specific statutory timeframes around reopening of contracts. I would also caution you that the some of the MOUs that we have seen that have been presented by the union contain a wide range of issues, many of them having little to do with health and safety, and include things such as, if teachers are working remotely, only requiring that they check their email or their Google Classroom once a day, allowing the employees to decide whether or not they will deliver live instruction, when they'll be available for office hours, providing that any stipends for extra duties such as coaching or drama would continue regardless of whether those extracurricular activities could be offered, and also providing stipends of up to $50 a month to cover electric and internet costs, as well as computers for teachers in their homes. So I would just advise you, rely on your district council. They are well aware of these issues. They're well aware of the things that you have to bargain and the things that remain management prerogatives, and just proceed with caution so that you don't end up restricting your ability to deliver the services to your students in the most effective way possible. And with that, there are a host of other legal issues that swirl around. I think we'll leave those to another day because I know given the many changes this week that you as board chairs probably have a lot of questions and things that you want to share with each other. So Bob, shall I turn it back to you?
Well, just for a second, Patrice, I just want to mention that we heard a couple of times this week from the commissioner that there will be metrics available to help school districts make decisions based on what the health data is showing. That is, which of the options would work better. One of the people asking these questions on a municipal telephone call asked if the metrics would be down to the town level. And what he said is no, it will probably be regional. Since districts right next to each other or towns right next to each other probably will affect each other, and they want to take that into consideration. So in the next couple of days, we would expect to see these metrics. So that is something new that will be coming down the pike, and certainly we'll let you know as soon as we know more about that. Patrice, you want to do the board chair share next?
Sure. So this is your opportunity to share challenges, to share successes, and just to generally get any advice from your colleagues and any help that the CABE staff can give you.
Can I ask a question about the metrics?
Sure.
I'm just curious, do you have the sense that the metrics will still leave us with complete flexibility, or will they be more like you should evaluate your school buildings and your ability to do X, Y, and Z and then apply it? Versus even if you meet the metrics, you still could go fully remote if everybody in your district, rises up.
Yeah, I think the metrics, the health metrics that have been talked about are along the lines of what the commissioner calls the guardrails. In other words, if the health metrics in your community, not just in your school building, but in your community or your surrounding community, indicated that full in-person learning was not safe, then you would pull back. You can always, as a district, be more cautious than what the health metric might indicate. Just as now, currently, I know some districts during flu season have closed their individual building in the district or the whole district for a 4-day weekend to allow for a thorough cleaning of the building and hopefully to allow the illness to subside. So it would be similar to that. Questions, comments?
Well, John Prince wrote in the chat box, may be helpful to add whether or not a reopener MOU negotiation could lead to arbitration.
Yes, it can. You negotiate for 25 days. You can be in mediation for 25 days. And if the issues are not resolved, they end up in arbitration. So that's why limiting the issues to the ones that you have to bargain over is very important to protect the rights of the district. And also remember that bargaining is very different from the discussions that you've been having with your representatives of the various unions in your community. That their input is very critical, but that's not actually bargaining.
I would like to hear from board chairs. What has been the discussion at your boards this week with the changes that were announced Monday?
Yeah, Bob, this is Leonard. Yeah, here in Windsor, I've scheduled a couple meetings in August. One is a policy committee meeting to waive any policies that may inhibit my superintendent from executing his duties whether it's in school, hybrid, or social distancing. I think the bigger concern that we're facing right now is the teacher union. They're very concerned about the safety of the kids and themselves, and gratefully they're more concerned about the kids than themselves. So thankful to that for that. And the new issue that's coming up is the immunity of the Board of Ed and the superintendent if we decide to open schools or go with a hybrid where the physical plant is open. Do we have any immunity that's going to be given to us through executive order of the governor?
Let me respond on the immunity issue. You do have governmental immunity, and the national experts on this issue feel that that really does, as long as you're following the recommended safety and health protocols, that would protect you. Now, that doesn't mean you can always be sued. You can be sued if you open schools and someone becomes ill. You can be sued if you don't open schools and families feel that their children are not getting an adequate public education. Around the illness issue, there would also be the question of causation. It would be very difficult for someone to prove that they became ill because they were in school, as opposed to they were in the grocery store or somewhere else in the community. You also, as board members, have statutory indemnification as long as your actions are not wanton, reckless, or malicious. So again, if you are following the health recommendations, you certainly would, your counsel would be able to defend the board and individual board members from any liability.
Patrice, when you say as long as we follow the health recommendations, does that mean the ones from the governor? Because, you know, there's the CDC, there's the American Academy of Pediatrics, there's so many groups that are generating recommendations.
Yeah, what I would really rely on is the state and local health officials. So if they say the metrics are such that schools can be open, and you are following the basic, if you took all of the recommendations, no one would ever be able to fulfill those. But if you're doing sanitizing of your facilities, if you're requiring masks, if you're keeping the physical distancing to the extent possible. So I would really rely on what's coming from the State Department of Education and the State Department of Public Health.
Thank you, Patrice.
You're welcome. I'm wondering if the board chairs are sort of still in shock from the Monday announcement, if that's why it's so quiet today.
I don't well, for me,
This is Fiona from the Torrington Board of Education. Can I ask a question relative to that?
Sure.
So I think there was some confusion about why people were upset about that. And so from our perspective, we had meetings, we had talked to people, we had said that the state would decide what model we were going to utilize for the start of school. So it then became, with a lot of our parents and faculty, was a trust issue of that we weren't being, completely upfront about what was happening. But with that said, we understand this is fluid and changing. My concern at this point is we're talking about trying to get kids back in school. But now that it's up to individual districts which model they're going to be utilizing, the financial piece is going to come into play. And we're trying to determine, it's obviously much more expensive to bring our kids back into school than either of the other two options. We had prepared our budget, prior to knowing how we were going to reopen. So we don't have the funds in our existing budget to basically absorb the costs of a reopening during a pandemic. How are we going to get around contentious relationships with our city if we choose that in-person learning is best, but the most costly. And are municipalities going to be able to make the decision either that remote learning is the cheapest option, clearly, and using it based on a financial decision versus what's in the best interest of our students, and how are boards going to manage that piece of weighing out the student benefit versus the financial obligations or benefits to the different models. And I'm just wondering if there's any guidance on that, because it's much different if the state sends down a directive that all kids have to be in school versus you can choose one of these three options. So I'm just curious if there's any guidance on that piece of it.
I'll start a response, and then I'd welcome board chairs to offer their perspectives. You've identified a huge challenge. It's a huge equity challenge because there are districts that are closer to having the resources to be able to reopen in person, and districts that are very far from that. We continue to press the State Department of Education and through them the governor around the issue of resources, that it's not just about providing more computers and internet connectivity in the event of full virtual learning, that even in that scenario, the support for students who lack structure in their homes is a key element, because we know many students were not engaged in distance learning or not successfully engaged in the spring. And then the costs related to either a hybrid model or a full in-person classroom experience. The governor, in his remarks, only talks about making sure that there's PPE and cleaning products available. And that is the tip of the iceberg. And I know many districts have already stockpiled those supplies. So I would open it up to other board chairs. I suspect you probably share these same concerns. And I wonder what your local strategies are.
So that still is an ongoing question for Ian. Okay, so if we're going to go this route, what other costs? And I think he's looking mainly at staffing. Cricket. Come on, people.
We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay, I see another question, Patrice, in the chat box, since people are not chatty today, but at least Megan has written down something. Has there been any guidance about paying bus companies and other vendors if we go full distance learning or do a hybrid model and don't need their services for some part of the next school year? Last year we had to negotiate. Does that stand true for the coming year?
And I would say it does remain true for the coming year. Again, there is so much uncertainty as to, even if you go full remote at the beginning of the year, whether at some point you would be able to switch to either a hybrid or full distance learning, full in-person learning, and you'd need those buses then. Again, it will depend. We know that there's a variation in terms of the provisions in your local contracts with your bus companies. Some of you actually have contracts that say you pay by the bus run, and therefore if the bus run is not needed, you are not obligated under the contract to make payment. Others have a flat fee for the entire year. So yes, you'll need to relook at those.
I have if I can make a point or a question.
Sure. Go ahead.
So this is Marion from Region 15. I'm a relatively new board chair, so I'm definitely out of my comfort zone. I cannot necessarily tell you what strategies that we're doing since Monday, because I'm trying to give our superintendent that space that you're recommending, and I'm trying to encourage other board members to give him that space so he does what he needs to do. So I can't really share, what strategies that we're going to do because I'm still waiting to hear myself a little bit. But I do want to impart, I have been to the last two CABE summer leadership conferences, and I do want to impart upon you guys, CABE, for if you have any access to the commissioner, that I feel that what's been done on Monday was an abdication of responsibility of our leadership in terms of the governor's office and our Department of Education, because in effect, they're going to be, I think, bootstrapping a lot of districts. And I understand there's some districts that are very small that are able to do social distancing no problem. I understand there's some districts that are very big that have a whole different set of problems. But it's us people in the middle that are really going to be struggling. I understand that we don't have immunity from suit. We might have immunity from liability, but I don't see any guidance. I'm not really thinking there's going to be good guidance that's going to be coming given what's happened so far. And what I see that the governor has done is that he set parameters for businesses. He set parameters for, weddings, like, what you're supposed to do. That's across the board. But he's kicking the responsibility for schools. He's not doing that because he doesn't want to face the music. And that's, in the end, I feel going to hurt kids.
I don't disagree. I do think it is. You can't do a one-size-fits-all. You can't. Because one school can't open, we all can't open. That I think is, certainly the answer is you need to be able to support the schools financially they can open. Although I will say that logistically, there's a lot that not total.
So I think that
I feel like it is what it is. It's not going to be the same across the nation.
So I think there are several good points that were made. First of all, for a new board chair, don't worry. I think every board chair feels out of their comfort zone right now. No one has ever had to chair a board in the middle of a pandemic. And so I commend you for giving your superintendent that space and that time to figure out the next steps. That we see, or at least I see, a difference from the governor's office in terms of the decisions, the parameters around opening businesses. Put those decisions in the hands of private employers and private business people to make a business judgment about could they afford to reopen, was it in their best interest to reopen, given the parameters that they would have to follow. Unfortunately, in the case of public schools, since you are reliant on your municipal budget for your funding, and that's already been set, and you're reliant on the state budget, where they have not indicated, other than passing through federal funds and some additional state money, which would not help you meet the cost of additional staffing or bus monitors, those big ticket items. I do agree that is perhaps the motivation that this has been left now back in the hands of local boards because of the unwillingness of the state to provide the necessary resources. Deb, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, and I don't mean to take away your point at all, and I'm sorry to interrupt. But probably speaking perhaps for a minority opinion here, in Wilton, we were glad to see that flexibility was added. Perhaps we didn't need this much flexibility, I get that. But we were feeling that under the earlier kind of stance, that we would all have to go full open 5 days a week, all kids on site. And we sincerely felt and still feel that that is risky to ask for our high school. So we wanted to be able to differentiate our approach based on this level of the school and the ages of the kids. So we were actually, again, maybe it's too much flexibility, but we were absolutely happy to not feel that we were being forced to have all kids on site 5 days a week in conditions, especially at the high school, that we were very dubious about.
Yeah, I have to add, I'm very frustrated with the way the governor has responded to that concern, which I think a lot of districts had at the high school level in particular. But by doing it this way, he's basically turned us all into epidemiologists, and we're not. And I'm very angry about it, because I think it's putting on, you know, local boards of education a decision that should be based on health metrics, pretty much, an ability to achieve health metrics. And I realize there's a fiscal piece and there's an equity piece that is extremely problematic, but in the end of the day, it's really about the virus, and we have to decide based on the science. And I don't see that happening, and it's very frustrating.
I have to say,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have to say, I agree with that point. That we're not epidemiologists, and I'm stupefied how we're supposed to be making these decisions. And I felt that the reopening plan directive was originally based upon the numbers that we're seeing in Connecticut. And now it seems to be based on the ability to cohort. So I'm really confused as to what we're supposed to be basing this decision on, because what happens if the elementary schools are not able to cohort? You know, it's just not clear. Like, just I don't think that they really thought through the impact of what they did on Monday. And I agree that there was, you know, concern at the high school level whether you're able to cohort or not, but to, you know, leave everything up to the individual school districts takes out a necessary role of our state in terms of helping us make that call in terms of when the numbers are not good or not. And I don't know, like, I just don't have a lot of faith that we're going to see that information in a helpful way from the Department of Public Health, given how things are going.
I wish I could say that we are more optimistic than you are, but I think from a staff perspective, we would have to agree at this point.
Yeah, I don't think that all of the various consequences of making those decisions being left to the local district have really been thought through. It almost came out in that press conference as if we're not quite sure what we're doing. There has been really no funding attached to letting it all happen at the local level. Your executive committee, the CABE executive committee, discussed this, decided at this point, until SDE and the governor sort of got their act together, we would not be making any public pronouncements on this. And I hope you saw the statement that Don Harris wrote. We're all sort of in this state of flux. Don't forget, we haven't gotten anything yet. And as soon as we do, we will certainly provide it to you on any of what the commissioner has been calling guardrails in making these decisions. So we're sort of waiting. A lot of the work that was done before in coming up with the 3 different plans, a lot of the discussion that was certainly at the subcommittee I was on, which hasn't met in about a month, as well as the regional advisory teams, none of that is being taken into consideration And excuse me, I hear somebody talking. Please mute yourself if you're on the phone. At this point, we're going to do everything we can to help you, but certainly the commissioner is very well aware of the feeling of confusion out in the local districts. He has heard it from us. He has heard it from the superintendents. Certainly, the newspapers have mentioned it. There really isn't more we can do except keep pushing for more resources and providing whatever information we finally get from the state on how this is to be done.
This is Leslie from Watertown.
Hi,
Thank
Leslie.
you, how are you? Thank you, everybody, for being here. I think one of the, this is a great venue for us to be able to also maybe vent a little bit about things that we don't want to vent about with our superintendents or in public, but we can with each other. So I'm going to take advantage of that and say the most damaging thing I found about the governor's announcement this week was when he used the word misimpression to make the public statement that all of the people on all of those committees, area and statewide, all of the boards of education, all of the superintendents in the state misinterpreted or had this misimpression, as he said, of what the directive was a huge slap in the face to the work that everybody has done to gain confidence in their public locally. All of the boards and commissions and committees who have advised the commissioner and advised the governor, that was egregious as far as I'm concerned. That was my venting, so thank you. It really did cause some problems for us.
I think he was fed that word as well by one of the reporters. So, because it was such an unclear formatted press conference, I think the way that the reporter fed that word to him, he took a hold of it.
He did, but he certainly had the opportunity to make it clear that they were changing their stance.
Right. And I would include in terms of the communications from the State Department of Education, from the Commissioner's Office, as recently as 4 days before that press conference, had been very clear that you were all to be developing 3 plans and to be prepared to launch any one of those 3 depending on the health metrics. And that clearly it was a very different statement that was made on Monday.
If I could, to the point of us all not being epidemiologists, which is absolutely right. I remember when we were talking about and wrestling with the concept of graduations. So our management team and executive team were sort of considering options along with our public health director, the East Shore Regional Public Health Director. And he finally said, let me be the bad guy. If I tell you that you're not going to be able to do this, just say that our public health director strongly recommends against whatever the plans are. And I'd like to think that we can do that, but I wonder if other districts have had that experience and if that might be something we can go back to. Because there is some consistency in the public health sort of ecosystem, and those people tend to be leaders now in the absence of other leadership.
Can I add something to that? I see it the other way around. So I don't think the problem is getting the local health authorities to say we shouldn't do X, Y, or Z, we should be more conservative. I think the problem is if it's appropriate to have elementary school fully back, let's say, epidemiologically, because we can cohort and we have very low spread, nobody's going to want to trust the local health department on that. They want to hear it from the governor that it's okay. And so unless we get that message, I think we're going to end up fully remote because the parents and the teachers are going to not accept that anything's safe if the governor and his team at Yale are not saying it's safe.
I agree with that completely.
And I think in the past couple of days, we've heard through the superintendents that some of the local health directors actually have very different recommendations to their boards of education and superintendents in communities that are located very close to each other, have similar circumstances, where one health director said you absolutely should not reopen, and the other gave his or her blessing to full reopening.
Wow, good to know.
This is Katie from the Guilford Board of Education. I just need to echo that, and we had that with graduation. And what it also created was then community members or parents saying to us, well, you know, Madison, the public health official in Madison feels comfortable. Why doesn't yours? It really creates a problem.
Good point.
And that's what you're going to get sued upon, is if you're not following the directive of your health director, then that's going to be a problem.
And I see in the chat that in some cases the local health director is punting to the school health advisor and vice versa. So,
and I just think that this goes back to the point is that it needs to come from the top. You know, just like he's making decisions, and I understand completely. There's some schools in a different spot than others. Those ones that are small, the ones that are big, the ones that have a lot of resources, I get it. But for those of us in the middle, if somehow those other schools could be excluded, but for those people who need more guidance, you know, here's your metrics. Here's what we say, because weddings you can't do over 25 people. You could do dancing, but you can't do social, you know, discussions. Like, he's gone to that level of detail. But for schools, you guys are on your own. It's going to be everyone's going to be going after each other. Parents are going to constantly be comparing all of us to each other. It's just going to, like, I don't think anyone's going to be happy no matter what, but it's going to be a lot worse if we're pitted against each other. And you know, I think that bottom line, who's going to get hurt because they don't want to, you know, get sued. They don't want to upset the unions. They don't want to upset wherever it is. But the kids are going to suffer. That's what I think.
We will certainly pass on these messages. I don't think there'll be something new for the commissioner to hear, but certainly we appreciate your being so upfront with what you're feeling today. I think that's really important for all of us to hear.
This is Fiona from Torrington Public Schools. I have a couple of other questions, if possible. Just one thing that I think, so what we're hearing from a lot of our parents is that if the Department of Public Health is not making these decisions, then we're technically not in a health crisis, and they're questioning the needs for masks. So I think that's an unintended consequence that is real for parents, whether we want to admit it or not. The other big question that I have that there doesn't seem to be an answer to, they talked in the ACHIEVE document about closures of 2 to 5 days, 7 to 10 days, or 10 to 14 days. And those metrics would come at a later date for what would require those closures. So is the intention that our health person that we contract with would be the one that would be making a decision if a child comes down with a fever in school, is sent to the isolation room? Are we going to be making that decision of if we, you know, make the kids in that class stay out, if the whole school shuts down? It's very unclear if this is a health issue that the school system should or should not be making these decisions. And is that going to be all over the place as well?
Bob, correct me if
who's responsible?
Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we heard on our conversation, our weekly conversation with the commissioner and his staff this week, that they do expect to that they are developing with the State Department of Public Health metrics around isolation room and how you handle those related issues and how long a student should be out of school when they have been identified as having the virus.
Yes, I think we're going to get more guidance in the next couple of weeks. I mean, certainly we're all concerned about these type of issues, when and who makes the decision to close. We certainly expect more information from the State Department, and certainly the commissioner has been talking to the Department of Health and the other groups. I'd also remind everybody, for what it's worth, and maybe it's not worth it because you're in such a state of confusion, but Connecticut is doing very well against other states. They have taken, the governor has taken strong action, especially about travel and so on. What we need for him to do, it sounds like to me, is reconsider how and what guardrails the department will provide as we go forward. We do want, we understand the difficulty in not having a one-size-fits-all. On the other hand, saying everybody just do what they think is in their best interest is very difficult. And it's very difficult, as just to tell you, as an association, since we've always been a local control association. But we are going to go back to the commissioner, explain what you have all said. I think some of the decisions will have to be made rather than by the board, but by the superintendent and the staff. But certainly we hear you, and we will go back with these concerns.
I did
Hi,
see
this
one. Go ahead.
Sorry, this is again Katie from the Guilford Board of Ed. I'm not pretending that my suggestion here is at all an easy one, but just throwing it out. You know, that a one size fits all with a waiver system might be an approach. You know, if half the schools need waivers, it's not a great approach. But again, it would be helpful to have some kind of standard language from the state, which we could either then follow or request flexibility with on an individual basis.
Thanks for that. And just to point out one question that was in the chat around, will there be specific guidance from the State Department of Education around distance learning protocols, whether it would be 100% in person or not? I would say very unlikely. There is some general guidance around communications to families and setting expectations if they choose to be involved in remote learning when classroom instruction is available in the school. There is guidance that came out through Columbia University earlier this week that outlines a very thorough process for districts to develop and review their distance learning protocols. But when I looked at that, I thought, how can a district possibly accomplish that in the next 4 weeks while they're also trying to figure out how they would space desks and put kids on school buses. So I don't think that you're going to see any specific requirements necessarily from the department around what distance learning would actually look like. And in many cases, you'll be asked to bargain about that at the local level. With that, out of respect for the fact that Will Marie now needs to pivot to produce our noon summer leadership conference, part 3, we wish you all a safe and healthy week and look forward to talking to you again next week. Be well.
Hopefully with more answers or information.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.